The night my grandma's horse changed everything, the sky was eerily quiet. No wind, no rustling trees, just a thick, heavy stillness that made the air feel charged, like something was about to happen. If I had known what we were about to discover, I might have paid more attention to the signs. But at the time, it was just another evening at Grandma's ranch, the same place I had spent countless summers, riding through open fields and listening to her stories about the old days. Her horse, Shadow, had always been special. Not in the way that people talk about their pets, but in a way that was hard to explain. He wasn't the fastest or the strongest, and he never won any ribbons at local competitions. But there was something about him, something in the way he watched people, as if he understood more than he should. Grandma used to say he had an old soul, that he had seen things no horse should have. I always thought she was just being sentimental. But that night, I realized she'd been telling the truth all along. It started with a storm, one that came out of nowhere. The air had been warm all day, the sun beating down on the fields, and then, just like that, the sky darkened. Thick, rolling clouds swallowed the last traces of daylight, and a strange tension settled over the ranch. The other horses in the stable grew restless, shifting and snorting, but Shadow stood perfectly still, staring toward the hills beyond the pasture. I remember watching him, feeling this weird pull in my chest, like he was waiting for something, or someone. Grandma must have sensed it too, because she came outside, her expression unreadable. "Get inside," she told me, but she wasn't looking at me. She was looking at Shadow. I hesitated. "What's going on?" I asked, but she just shook her head. "Not now, just trust me." But before I could take a step, Shadow moved. And not just in any ordinary way. One moment he was standing in the middle of the field, and the next he was somewhere else. It wasn't like he ran or jumped. It was like he blinked out of existence for a second and then reappeared several yards away, his dark eyes locked onto something in the distance. My breath caught in my throat. I had no explanation for what I just saw, and from the way Grandma's face paled, neither did she. "What was that?" I whispered, my pulse racing. But before she could answer, Shadow did it again. A flicker, just a heartbeat of nothingness. And then he was even farther away, galloping toward the hills with a speed that defied logic. That was the moment I realized we had been wrong about Shadow all along. He wasn't just special. He wasn't just different. He had a secret, one we had only just begun to uncover, and whatever it was leading him straight into the darkness. I stood frozen, my breath coming in short, shallow gasps as Shadow disappeared into the distance. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what I had just seen. Horses didn't just vanish and reappear. That wasn't possible. But I had seen it with my own eyes, not once, but twice. And judging by the way Grandma's hands trembled at her sides, she had seen it too. "Grandma," I whispered, my voice barely audible over the rising wind. "What's happening?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she took a step forward, her gaze locked on the spot where Shadow had been just seconds ago. The lines on her face seemed deeper, her usual calm replaced with something else, something that looked a lot like fear. "This isn't right," she finally murmured. "This isn't supposed to happen again." Again? My stomach tightened. That one word changed everything. This wasn't just some freak accident. Grandma knew something, something she hadn't told me. I turned to her, my heart pounding. "What do you mean, again? Has this happened before?" She hesitated, then exhaled slowly, as if weighing her words. "Not like this," she admitted. "Not in a long, long time." I wanted to press her for more, but before I could, a distant sound cut through the thick night air, a low, haunting call, almost like a whistle, but not quite. It wasn't human, and it wasn't anything I had ever heard from an animal either. The sound sent a shiver down my spine. Shadow was still out there, somewhere in the darkness, and someone was calling him. Grandma grabbed my arm. "We have to go inside," she said urgently. "Now." "But Shadow—" "He'll come back," she said, though her voice held no real certainty. "If we go after him, we might not." I didn't understand what she meant, but the fear in her eyes was enough to make me follow her back toward the house. As we stepped inside, she locked the door behind us, something I had never seen her do before. Out here, on the ranch, doors were rarely locked. There had never been a reason to. Grandma stood by the window, peering into the darkness. The wind had picked up, rattling the old house, but Shadow was nowhere to be seen. My chest felt tight. The last time I had seen him, he wasn't just running. He was disappearing. I turned back to Grandma. "You need to tell me the truth," I said. "What's really going on?" For a long moment, she just stared at me, as if debating whether or not she should say the words out loud. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, "Shadow isn't an ordinary horse. He never was." I swallowed hard. "Then what is he?" Grandma sighed, her gaze distant. "Something that was never meant to be found." I swallowed hard, my mind spinning. Shadow wasn't just a horse. Grandma had known this all along, but what did she mean by never meant to be found? And if that was true, then who, or what, had found him now? "Grandma, please," I said, my voice shaky. "I need to know everything." She looked away, as if the weight of her own memories was too much to face. "Shadow came to us in a way no horse should," she finally said. "One night, years ago, he just appeared in the pasture. No tracks leading in, no signs of how he got there. Just standing there, waiting, like he had always belonged." A chill crawled up my spine. "And you never questioned it?" She exhaled sharply. "Of course I did. But the next morning when I saw him move, I knew he was different. He wasn't just fast. He could vanish. One second he'd be in front of me, the next, gone." My chest tightened. "So you kept him, even after seeing that?" She nodded. "I should have let him go, but something told me he had come to us for a reason." A sudden gust of wind rattled the windows, and a deep, distant noise echoed through the night, the same eerie call I had heard before, only this time it was closer. I glanced at Grandma, my pulse hammering. "Who's looking for him?" She didn't answer. Instead, she reached for the lantern on the table, her hand steady now, as if she had already made up her mind. "Come on," she said. "If they've found him, we don't have much time." My breath hitched. "We?" Grandma met my gaze, her expression unreadable. "It's time you saw the truth for yourself." The night air was thick with tension as we stepped outside, the lantern casting long, flickering shadows across the ground. Shadow stood at the far end of the pasture, his ears pinned back, his muscles tense like he could sense something we couldn't. The wind had died down, leaving an eerie stillness in its place. Grandma moved with purpose, but I could see it in her eyes. She was afraid. I wanted to ask again who was looking for him, but the words caught in my throat. A sound cut through the silence, low and rhythmic, like footsteps crunching against the dry earth. But they weren't coming from one direction. They were everywhere, circling us. I turned, my pulse pounding, but I saw nothing, just the empty fields stretching into the dark. "Grandma," I whispered, my voice barely carrying. She raised a hand, signaling me to stay quiet. Then, as if responding to an unspoken command, Shadow let out a deep, guttural snort and pawed the ground. And then, it happened. Right before my eyes, his form wavered, like a ripple in the air. For a split second, he wasn't standing there at all. He was somewhere else, flickering between the here and the unknown. My breath hitched. A sudden gust of wind swept through, and then came the voice, low unfamiliar, yet full of knowing. You kept what was never yours. I spun around, heart hammering. There, just beyond the fence line, stood a figure, barely visible in the dim light. I couldn't see their face, but I felt their gaze settle on me, heavy and full of something I didn't understand. Shadow let out a sharp cry. Grandma stepped in front of me. "We have to run." I barely had time to process Grandma's words before she grabbed my wrist and pulled me back toward the house. Shadow reared up, his hooves striking the air as if trying to ward off something unseen. But I could feel it, the shift in the atmosphere, the weight of the presence watching us. My pulse roared in my ears as we stumbled toward the porch. Then, just as we reached the steps, a deep, rumbling noise echoed across the land. It wasn't thunder. It was something else, something coming from beneath us. The ground trembled, sending a sharp vibration up my legs. I turned, my breath catching in my throat as Shadow began to glow. Not a soft, golden shimmer, but something unnatural, something alive. His dark coat pulsed with energy, rippling like light on water, his eyes reflecting something beyond this world. Grandma cursed under her breath, something I had never heard her do before. "It's too soon," she muttered. "They weren't supposed to find us yet." I spun to her, my chest tightening. "Who? Grandma, what is happening?" Before she could answer, the figure at the fence moved. But they didn't walk. They glided, almost like they weren't touching the ground at all. My stomach twisted as they raised a hand, palm facing toward Shadow. The glow around him flickered. His breathing turned ragged. He was struggling. "No!" Grandma shouted, stepping in front of me. "You can't take him!" The figure tilted their head, their voice smooth but cold. "You don't have a choice. He was never meant to be yours." A sharp gust of wind knocked me back, forcing me against the house. My mind raced. Shadow wasn't just a horse. He was something else, something powerful, and whatever this person was, they had come to claim him. Shadow let out a piercing, almost human-like cry, his form flickering again, and then for just a second I saw it, something hidden beneath his skin, a shape not quite of this world, shifting and breaking through. And that's when I realized we were never supposed to keep him. Shadow let out another agonized cry, his glowing form trembling as if he were being pulled in two different directions. The air around us crackled, thick with something I couldn't explain, and I could barely breathe as the figure stepped closer. Their presence was overwhelming, almost suffocating, but Grandma held her ground. "You can't take him," she repeated, her voice fiercer this time. "He chose to stay with us." The figure didn't even blink. It was never his choice. They raised their hand higher, and suddenly Shadow collapsed to his knees, his breathing ragged. I felt a surge of panic. I had no idea what was happening, but I knew one thing. If I didn't do something, we were going to lose him. Without thinking, I ran forward, throwing myself between the figure and Shadow. "Stop!" I shouted, my voice shaking. "You're hurting him." For the first time, the figure hesitated. Their gaze flicked to me, studying me with something unreadable in their expression. "You don't understand what he is," they said, their voice almost softer now. "He doesn't belong here." I turned, looking at Shadow, really looking at him. His body flickered again, that strange, otherworldly form threatening to push through. And then it hit me. Maybe the figure was right. Maybe Shadow wasn't meant to stay. But that didn't mean I was ready to let him go. Grandma reached for me, her voice tight with emotion. "If you love him, you have to set him free." Tears burned my eyes, but I knew she was right. Slowly, I placed a trembling hand on Shadow's head. He looked at me with those glowing, intelligent eyes, and in that moment, I swore I could hear him. Not words exactly, but a feeling. Gratitude, love, sorrow. He had been hiding for so long, but now it was time. I stepped back, nodding. "Go," Shadow let out a deep breath, and then, in a blinding flash of light, he changed. His true form, something ethereal, something breathtaking, emerged, shimmering like the night sky itself. The wind howled as the figure lowered their hand, the tension finally breaking, and just like that, Shadow was gone. Silence fell over the land. The figure gave me one last look, something almost like respect in their eyes, before vanishing into the darkness. I stood there, my heart aching, knowing I had done the right thing. But as the night settled, one thought lingered. We had discovered Shadow's secret power too late, and now he was lost to us forever. The night felt quieter than ever before. The air was still, as if the world itself had paused to acknowledge what had just happened. Shadow was gone, and with him, the mystery that had surrounded our lives for so long. I wanted to believe he was at peace, that he had finally found where he truly belonged. But standing there in the empty field, all I felt was the weight of loss pressing down on my chest. Grandma placed a hand on my shoulder, her touch warm despite the chill in the air. "He was never meant to stay," she murmured, almost to herself. But he stayed as long as he could. I swallowed hard, staring at the spot where he had vanished. It still didn't feel real. Shadow had been more than just a horse. He had been family. And now the barn felt emptier than ever. For days after, I found myself looking toward the pasture, half expecting to see him standing there, waiting for me. The farm felt different without him, like something essential was missing. But as time passed, I started noticing small things. A soft gust of wind when the air was still, the faintest echo of hooves late at night. Maybe it was just my imagination, or maybe a part of Shadow had never really left. One evening, as the sun dipped below the hills, I stood by the fence, lost in thought. Grandma joined me, silent for a long moment before finally speaking. "Some bonds don't break, no matter what," she said softly. "Maybe one day we'll see him again." I nodded, a small smile finding its way onto my face. It didn't hurt as much now. Shadow had given us a gift, not just his presence, but the memories we would carry forever. As I turned to head back inside, I caught a glimpse of movement in the trees. Just for a second, I could have sworn I saw a familiar shape, a dark figure with glowing eyes watching over us. Then, in the blink of an eye, it was gone. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. Some things didn't need explaining. Shadow had always been more than just a horse, and in some way, I knew he always would be.